King and Chick rounding turn 4. And down the stretch they come, and it's...
All right, we are back. So Formula One is finally back after 1 whole month. And what a horrible race we had to come back. So first things first, we're going to talk about the obvious things. Charles Leclerc with a horrible race. Verstappen with a good recovery and some dicey bits. Ferrari is kind of looking thereabouts, and McLaren is whoa. Like every time we get to Miami in the last 3 seasons, McLaren is like, yeah, you know, like you guys know the meme of like the guy chilling in the back playing the video game, and then like I'll probably put it up there. The guy chilling playing the game, and then like lock in. That's McLaren in Miami. But anyway, we've got a lot to get into. It was a pretty mundane race, nothing too crazy. We're going to check if the new rules actually did anything to the racing. But otherwise, it's been a good, okay-ish first race back. We actually have another 3 weeks to the second race. It's like another break. But, you know, we'll see how that goes. And first things first, Kimi Antonelli, 3 poles, 3 wins in a row. Like, this guy's on fire. Like, if you are a George Russell fan, I'm sure you're shaking right now. Like, I'm sorry to say, but I think Kimi is the real deal. Like, honestly speaking, I think Kimi Antonelli has got the minerals to be the world champion. As a teenager, by the way, like 19 years old, he's still technically a teenager. But, you know, like, I think Kimi Antonelli could actually take this title. Like, if he keeps moving on like this, you know, obviously there are some things that affected George Russell's race. Firstly, George Russell wasn't comfortable with the car this weekend. The track surface, the characteristics of the tires, he doesn't like the loose, no, not loose, but like the smooth surface of a track. Usually he wants a surface that's a bit more, that has a bit more grip, that offers him a bit more grip, that slides a little bit less. It's like the same scenario with Piastri and Norris, where if it's a grippier surface, then it favors more towards Piastri. So in this scenario, a grippier surface favors more towards Russell. Well, that's based on, I guess, the insider information and stuff. Hey, I'm not a pro, I'm not an expert. So George Russell fans, if George Russell fumbles in the next races, hey, you didn't hear it from me, man. But all I'm saying is that George Russell should have a better chance when we get into further into the season, you know, that's what I'm saying. But so far it's looking like George Russell is under some pressure. I think he will bounce back. I think overall George Russell is still a bit quicker, and the experience should help him out a little bit more. And obviously him going against Hamilton in 2022, 2023 should have really helped him, and establishing himself in 2025, you know, 2024 rather, because 25 Hamilton had already left. But you know, that phase should have really helped him in the team, compared to Antonelli, who is still new. He's still not yet polished. He's still diamond in the rough, you know. He's still getting polished, but he's getting there. And more performances like this, I think Kimi is gonna be serious contention. In terms of the race itself, pretty mundane. It was a good start from obviously the Ferraris. We know the Ferraris. Leclerc, the mighty start, flying start, and you know, at this point, it's pretty usual. And then onwards, I mean, predictable Ferrari pace throughout the race. They kind of just fell backwards. And then from that point onwards, it was just the Mercedes-powered cars doing much better. Verstappen also had a pretty weird spin at the first corner, which is, you know, I guess it's part of the rules. These cars do have a lot of torque spike that happens. Same thing caught out Oscar in Australia, actually. During the formation lap, you know, and it's caught out many drivers, even Leclerc spun. Like, you know, these cars are a bit of a challenge to drive, which is good because it makes the drivers, you know, a bit more, they have to use a bit more of their skill. That's what we want, is it not? But then people are like, yo, the racing is bad because too much AI in the car. So it's like, people don't know what they really want. Do you guys want a car that's difficult to drive, or do you guys want a car that's easy to drive, but like, everybody like what do you guys want? Like, you know, what do we want? I mean, we all want V8s and stuff, but then like if we go back to the actual racing during the V8 and V10 era, it was kind of mid. You know, it was kind of processionary and like the same. But people don't really care about that because it sounded good. But that's another topic. So the cars were pretty okay. Getting into the cars, actually, that's a good topic. And the regulations. The regulation changes weren't really evident here because this track has a lot of recharging places. Like there's so many long straights, hard braking zones, and you don't have that many places where you just overuse your energy. So it's not the best indicator of the new changes, but it is a pretty good indicator of like the overall racing, because even though we did slightly change the power figures, we slightly changed how much you can recharge from 8 to 7 megajoules per lap, you know, and also the super clipping, increasing that, all those things, they didn't really do much in this race. So we'll take a bit more races to see if this actually helps, you know, with that yo-yoing racing that people aren't really liking, and the fake racing, artificial racing that people don't really like. But otherwise, you know, as a Ferrari fan, honestly, this season feels like another write-off. Chassis-wise, I think the Ferrari car is really good. Like before Miami, I would say we had the best car chassis-wise. But now, I think with McLaren's improvements, Red Bull also really improving, and as well as Mercedes still being pretty strong, I think we are still, I can say we are about on par now. I think now McLaren has the best chassis. Mercedes still has the best understanding of the power unit, obviously, and they have the best power unit overall. And Red Bull, I think now is really good on all positions. They're not like the best at anything, but I think they're good enough to the point where the chassis of the car is good. The engine was the best, or amongst the best, like the ICE side of the engine, not the electrical side. The electrical side is decent, but the internal combustion engine side is pretty good, like on par with Mercedes or maybe better, based on who you ask and who you support. If you support Red Bull, you probably think it's not the best because, you know, you want yours to feel like it's the best and blah blah blah, all that stuff. But either way, is because of the whole agio, and yeah, that's another topic for another day. Upgrades are gonna come, and we'll see who actually gets the benefits based on what the FIA sees in the dynos and stuff. But that's another topic. So overall, looking at the car performances, Ferrari is pretty good, but they are not good enough. And their biggest weakness is on the power unit side. I think their biggest weakness is specifically to do with the engine rather than the electrical side. I think the electrical side is okay enough, and the deployment side is okay enough, but the engine itself feels like it lacks raw power. Which kind of sucks because Ferrari is usually known for building some really good power units. Whether they cheat or not, that's a different topic, but they are known for building really strong power units. Sometimes not outright the most powerful, but like overall the best power units over the years. If you look at the hybrid era, if you look at the V8, if you look, you know, not hybrid era, sorry about that, the V10 era and then the V8 era, they are known for having some pretty good power units. The only one that was good during the hybrid era was 2019, but we know how that was, and 2018 was also pretty decent actually. So yeah, overall that's it regarding the regulations and the race. Moving forward, what can we expect from the next races? Next race is Canada. 3 more weeks we have to wait, which kind of sucks because 3 weeks is a bit long, but that means more upgrades are coming. McLaren is bringing a second set of upgrades, like McLaren is not holding back. And I mean, if we look at the first set, how much it pushed them up, because before Miami they were good, but they were like, you know, I think what happened in Japan was a bit of luck and unlucky at the same time. They were a bit lucky to have, I guess, Oscar to have, you know, really outperformed in qualifying, and then they were a bit unlucky at the same time to also have not won that race. So Japan was kind of like one of those races where kind of right place, right time, but then just unlucky at the end of the day not to win that race. And then when we go to Miami, like they weren't just lucky, like pure performance wise, they were really, really good. Like if you compare the overall pace between them and Mercedes, it's basically the same. Like honestly, looking at it, the race was lost during that whole pit stop phase, safety cars and stuff. That's basically where McLaren lost the race, where Norris lost the race to Kimi Antonelli. So honestly speaking, McLaren is in a really good position. If you're a McLaren fan, this season, something good might happen. The constructors is still on, the drivers is still on. It's going to be very interesting. Obviously, the upgrades are going to determine who goes where. And also the other thing helping Mercedes is that based on last season, they do have slightly more time in the wind tunnel. So for the next few months and the next few races, they will have that advantage, which will carry over into the second half of the season. McLaren's advantage will only start taking over like later in the season and towards next year, assuming they do finish second in the Constructors Championship, which might happen based on how the cars are currently performing. But this is going to be just a development war. Like the way the cars are now is going to change from the time we get to like Spain, which is usually another big place teams bring upgrades. So we will see how it goes. Obviously, Miami had the biggest set of upgrades and it's probably going to have the biggest set, apart from maybe like Monza, which is usually after the summer break. But as it stands, McLaren is looking really good. Mercedes, pretty chilled unless you're a Russell fan. Red Bull, not too bad. More to come, but not too bad at all. And what's another team we can look at? Ferrari is... I was hopeful for Ferrari. They had a lot of potential. They had a lot of upgrades, but I think their biggest weakness is simply the engine. So if they don't really upgrade the engine, they're going to need to do something crazy with the chassis and mechanical side of the car, which they're going to have to like gain maybe like half a second on that side of things compared to everyone else. And then, have to have like a buffer so that they can be like, okay, now we're the best overall, have the best car. But that's very unlikely. Like Ferrari hasn't been known for having the best chassis for the past few seasons, even for the past few regulations. Usually they've been like a balanced team where engine is good, chassis is good, and they kind of just, go with that. Their cars usually have quirks, which this car is not that much different. Leclerc is doing bits with that car though, like I won't lie, he's doing really well. Same as Hamilton, he didn't have the best weekend, but I think he will have a slightly better weekend when we do get to Canada. He always does well there. And yeah, we'll see how that goes. But otherwise, not a horrible race from Ferrari as a whole. It was disappointing, but wasn't bad per se. They could have done better, but it could have been worse at the same time, So overall, as a Ferrari fan, it's disappointing. It sucks, but we'll get back into it and yeah, we'll see how that goes. But yeah, anyway, I think that's it for now. I will get back with more news, more specific news on like what to expect into the next races, what we can look forward to. But for now, I think that's just the race rundown of what happened. And yeah, I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace.
Norris blasts Verstappen for costing himself a podium. Hamilton makes a big statement on Ferrari's performance. And all the latest F1 news from the Miami GP. Picture this. Last lap. Miami Grand Prix. Charles Leclerc is sitting in third place, fighting tooth and nail to hold off Oscar Piastri. The podium is right there. He can almost touch it. And then, in the blink of an eye, everything falls apart. A spin. A barrier. A car that can barely turn right. And just like that, a podium finish turns into an 8th place result. So what exactly happened in Miami? And what does this mean for Leclerc's title hopes? Let's break it all down. Welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, we cover everything Formula One, from race breakdowns to driver psychology to the stories behind the headlines. And today we have got one of the most dramatic self-inflicted disasters of the 2026 season so far. So make sure you stick around to the end, because we are going to unpack not just what happened, but why it happened, and what it reveals about where Leclerc is mentally and physically right now in this championship. Let's start at the very beginning, because the Miami Grand Prix actually started really well for Charles Leclerc and Ferrari. He lined up third on the grid at the Miami International Autodrome, and right from the get-go, Leclerc did what Leclerc does best. He launched from third to first off the line. That incredible ability to get off the line, to use that Ferrari power and find the front of the pack in the opening seconds, it's something we have seen from him time and time again this season. And in Miami, it worked perfectly. He slotted in ahead of Lando Norris and Kimi Antonelli, and suddenly Ferrari looked like genuine race winners. But Formula One is a race of attrition, strategy, and pressure. And all three of those elements came crashing down on Leclerc throughout the afternoon. Now, here's where things get interesting. Leclerc was the first of the lead group to make his pit stop, and he was not happy about it. You could hear it in his voice over the radio. He challenged the team, asking why they were stopping, and when the rain that the strategists were apparently predicting would arrive. He literally told the team, and I'm paraphrasing here, that next time they make a big call, they should loop him in. And look, that kind of driver frustration over strategy is nothing new in Formula One. Drivers live and die by the calls made in the pit wall, and when you feel like a decision isn't going your way, emotions run high. But as the race played out, the rain never came. The strategy shuffled itself out, and somehow, despite the early stop, Leclerc found himself back in third place after overtaking a struggling Max Verstappen. So at this point, he's still in the game. Third place. A podium within reach. Oscar Piastri is behind him in fourth, chasing hard. And this is where the tension really starts to build. Piastri closes the gap. We are talking a deficit of about 2.5 seconds that he manages to eat up, and with 2 laps to go, he makes his move on Leclerc at turn 17 on the penultimate lap. Clean. Decisive. And now Leclerc is in fourth, not third. But there's still a lap left. There's still a chance to respond. This is the moment where everything unravels. On the final lap, at turn 3, Leclerc goes for it. He's pushing absolutely everything the SF26 has got, trying to find a way back past Piastri, trying to salvage the podium. And he spins. Not just a minor slide. Not just running a little wide. He full-on loses it and clips the barrier with the front left of his car. The damage is immediate and significant. His Ferrari can barely turn right. He's nursing a potentially punctured tire and what sounds like suspension damage, limping around the rest of the circuit just trying to get the car to the finish line. And during that agonizing final lap, he loses positions to George Russell and Max Verstappen, dropping from what would have been a points battle to a deeply frustrating classified finish. But wait, it gets worse. Because the stewards were watching. As Leclerc struggled to keep his damaged car on the track, he repeatedly went off the circuit. And look, in isolation, you might think that's understandable. The car was damaged. He was fighting just to get home. But the stewards ruled that even with the mechanical issues, going off the track and gaining an advantage repeatedly isn't justifiable. The result was a 20-second time penalty applied after the race, and Leclerc dropped from 6th all the way down to 8th in the final classification. From 3rd to 8th. In the space of one corner. On the final lap. Now, here's what separates Charles Leclerc from a lot of drivers, and it's something I genuinely respect about him. When the cameras were on him after the race, when the microphones were in his face, he didn't point fingers at the pit wall. He didn't throw Ferrari under the bus. He looked squarely in the mirror and said this was on him. He was clear about it. He said that even if the strategy had been perfect, that mistake on the last lap would have cost him the podium anyway. He said he needs to look at himself first before having any conversation with the team about optimization. And then he used a phrase that really stuck with me. He called it not acceptable. Not in a dramatic, rage-filled way, but in a very measured, very self-aware way. Like someone who holds himself to an extremely high standard and genuinely cannot stomach falling short of it. He also cleared something up that a lot of people were speculating about online. Some fans were saying that frustration must have played a role. That the pressure of the championship, the early pit stop dispute, the position changes, all of it must have boiled over and led to an emotional error. But Leclerc pushed back on that directly. He said he was calm. Actually, quite calm in the car. He'd actually made a tactical decision on the penultimate lap not to make life too difficult for Piastri's overtake, almost like a chess player setting up the board for the final move. His plan was to let Oscar get past without too much of a fight and then try to retake the position on the very last lap. So the thinking was there. The strategy in his head was considered. He just pushed the car past its limit at turn 3 and lost it. He even acknowledged something that Formula One fans will find fascinating. With these 2026 cars and the new energy management systems, there are always questions about deployment. How much energy are you getting out of a corner? How much is the hybrid system contributing? And on the final lap, there might actually be a slightly different deployment profile because you're not managing energy for future laps anymore. You just need to get to the end. So there's a possibility, and he acknowledged this without using it as an excuse, that the car deployed a little more power than expected at that corner, contributing to the snap. But he was very deliberate about not hiding behind that. He said it plain. It's on me. It's not acceptable. That level of accountability is something that, whether you're a Ferrari fan or not, you have to acknowledge. He's not passing the buck. He's holding himself to the fire. But here's the cold, hard reality of what this means for the championship. And this is where we need to talk about the bigger picture. Before Miami, Leclerc was sitting third in the Drivers' Championship standings. He's still third. But the gap between him and the top has grown in a way that should concern every single Ferrari fan watching this. Kimi Antonelli, who has been absolutely on fire this season with 3 wins from the first 4 races, is now 41 points ahead of Leclerc. Let that number sink in. 41 points. In a sport where a race win gives you 25 points, that's already a very significant gap to close with the season still in its early chapters. And then there's Lando Norris breathing down Leclerc's neck from just 8 points behind. After finishing second in Miami, Norris is very much alive in this title conversation, and McLaren's pace suggests they're only going to get stronger. Leclerc is caught in a squeeze, being stretched from both directions, and a self-inflicted 0 points from the podium race like Miami is precisely the kind of moment that championship campaigns look back on as turning points. Now, I'm not saying Leclerc is done. Not even close. The season is long. There are many races left. And we've seen championships swing dramatically in Formula One. But momentum matters. Confidence matters. And right now, Antonelli has all the momentum. What Leclerc needs to do, and what it sounds like he's already doing based on how he spoke after Miami, is channel this disappointment productively. The anger, the frustration, the self-criticism, all of that is fuel. The question is whether he burns it efficiently or whether he lets it simmer into something that affects his judgment on track. He's got the talent. He's got the car. Ferrari's 2026 machine clearly has the pace to fight at the front, as we saw with that rocket start at Miami. The strategy communication between driver and pit wall needs to improve, and from the sounds of that radio exchange, even Leclerc knows there are conversations to be had there. But the raw speed is not in question. The mental reset is what matters most heading into the next race. Can Leclerc park Miami, learn from it, and come back sharper? Based on his past performances and the way he carries himself, I believe he can. But he needs to do it fast, because this championship is moving at an incredible pace, and Antonelli is not showing any signs of slowing down. What do you think? Is Leclerc still a genuine title contender after Miami? Or has this race opened up a gap that's going to be too difficult to close? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. And if you want to keep up with all the action as this insane 2026 season unfolds, make sure you hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss a single breakdown. We'll see you in the next one. What if I told you that one spin in turn 2 completely unraveled the race for multiple drivers before it even really got started? That is exactly what happened in Miami, and today we are breaking down the full chaos of lap 1 at the 2026 Miami Grand Prix, what it meant for Pierre Gasly, and why Max Verstappen's aggressive instincts may have cost him and everyone around him big time. Welcome back to the channel. If you are new here, we cover Formula One from every possible angle: the drama, the strategy, the moments that never quite make the highlight reel but absolutely should. Hit that subscribe button because today's video is exactly why this sport is unlike anything else in the world. Now, before we get into the details, let me paint the picture for you. Lights out in Miami. The heat is absolutely baking the circuit. The grid is stacked, the stakes are sky high, and within about 30 seconds of the race beginning, we already have one of the most talked about moments of the entire weekend. And it starts with Max Verstappen doing something that, honestly, we have started to recognize as a pattern. Going for it when maybe, just maybe, a little more patience would have paid off far better. So let us set the scene properly. Verstappen starts the race, and as he enters turn 2, something goes wrong. He spins. Not a small, easily managed moment at the side of the track. No. He ends up stationary right in the middle of the racing surface. Picture that. Cars coming through at race speed, a dozen drivers all fighting for position, adrenaline through the roof, and suddenly there is a Red Bull sitting almost completely still directly in their path. The margin for disaster in that moment is razor thin. Now here is where Pierre Gasly enters the story, and this is the part that genuinely makes you feel for the guy. Gasly had actually made a brilliant start. He launched from 9th on the grid, and by the time he cleared turn 1, he had fought his way up to somewhere around 6th or 7th. That is a genuinely excellent opening lap move, the kind of aggressive but controlled driving that earns you positions without doing anything reckless. He was in a great spot. He had momentum, he had pace, and things were looking really promising for Alpine. Then he sees it. The rear wing of Verstappen's Red Bull coming into view, barely moving. And here is the brutal part of Gasly's situation. He was completely boxed in. Lewis Hamilton was on his right. George Russell was on his left. There was absolutely nowhere to go. His only option was to stand on the brakes as hard as he possibly could and hope that was enough to avoid turning the situation into a genuinely dangerous collision. He managed it. Verstappen avoided contact entirely, which was fortunate given the circumstances. But the cost for Gasly was enormous. That moment of braking, that completely unavoidable reaction to someone else's mistake, swallowed him whole. The cars that had been behind him suddenly flooded through. One moment he is fighting for 6th or 7th, the next he has dropped 5 or 6 positions just like that, through no fault of his own. He was in the right place doing the right thing, and the race just robbed him completely. Now Gasly himself spoke about this after the race, and what he said really stuck with me. He pointed out that if he had actually made a worse start, he probably would have ended lap 1 in a better position. Let that sink in for a second. His reward for executing a perfect launch and racing intelligently through turn 1 was to be directly in the path of the chaos, positioned with no escape route. If he had been slower off the line, he would have been further back when the spin happened, cleared the whole situation safely, and emerged in a much stronger spot. The better you drove, the more you got punished. That is one of those Formula One moments that is almost impossible to fully rationalize, and it highlights just how much randomness still exists in this sport despite all the preparation and engineering. He described feeling gutted by the sheer bad luck of the timing. He was at exactly the wrong place at precisely the wrong moment. And then, just to make sure the race truly could not be recovered, things got even worse later on when he got collected in contact with Liam Lawson and ended up flipped into the barrier. That was the end of his day entirely. Speaking of the Lawson incident, Gasly was actually quite measured about it when he addressed the media. He acknowledged he knew Lawson was alongside him going into that corner. He said he had left space, roughly a car and a half on the inside, specifically to give Lawson the option to slot in safely rather than forcing a collision. He admitted that with the benefit of hindsight, His move may have been a touch too optimistic in terms of how the space was going to work out. He had not fully seen the footage at that stage, so he was careful not to be too definitive, but he was honest that it perhaps did not work out the way he intended. The stewards, for their part, looked into the Lawson crash and concluded that a gearbox failure on Lawson's car was a contributing factor to the incident. As a result, no penalty was handed out. That is a fairly significant finding because it shifts the narrative away from a racing incident being purely about driver judgment and introduces a mechanical element that was beyond anyone's control in that moment. Now let us zoom out and talk about Verstappen specifically, because the Miami Grand Prix really told us something important about where his head is at right now in 2026. This season, with the regulation changes and the incredible form that Kimi Antonelli has been showing, Verstappen is under genuine pressure in a way that he perhaps was not during those dominant championship years. And when pressure builds on a driver as intensely competitive as Verstappen, you sometimes see the throttle get pressed just a little harder than the situation requires. The spin at turn 2 is a perfect example. There was aggressive intent there, a desire to gain positions immediately, to be at the front before anyone could get established ahead. But it backfired. Instead of gaining ground, he found himself stationary in the middle of the circuit, lucky to have avoided being hit by anyone, and having cost himself significant positions before the race had barely started. There is a version of that opening lap where a more patient Verstappen clears turn 2 cleanly, settles in, and races strategically to build toward a strong result. That version of the race did not happen. And it was not just Gasly who paid the price for the chaos, though Gasly's experience was certainly the most dramatic and the most costly in terms of positions lost. Any driver who had to navigate around a stationary car in the middle of the circuit during the absolute frenzy of lap 1 is going to lose something, whether that is momentum, track position, or tires from heavy braking. Verstappen's mistake had a ripple effect that touched multiple people's races in a very real way. Now let us talk about the bigger picture here, because this race fits into a fascinating narrative about the 2026 season overall. Kimi Antonelli has been extraordinary. 3 wins from the first 4 races of the season is a genuinely remarkable start, and right now the conversation has shifted in a very real way. This is no longer just about whether Verstappen can defend. It is about whether Antonelli has the pace, the consistency, and the mental composure to carry this form through an entire championship campaign. For Verstappen, moments like Miami matter more than they might have in previous years. You cannot afford self-inflicted damage when someone else is putting together results like Antonelli is. Every position dropped through your own mistake is doubly damaging because you are not just missing out on points, you are watching your rival bank them instead. The gap does not stand still. It grows. McLaren also have something to say about all of this. Lando Norris has been fairly vocal about his frustrations with strategy calls that did not go his way in Miami. When you are at the sharp end of a championship fight and you feel like the team has cost you positions that were genuinely available, that stings badly. The Miami race left Norris feeling that a real opportunity had been left on the table, and that is the kind of feeling that can linger into the following weeks if it is not addressed properly internally. What Miami ultimately showed us is that 2026 is shaping up to be one of the most genuinely unpredictable seasons in recent memory. You have got a new generation driver in Antonelli producing performances that are difficult to argue with. You have got Verstappen under real pressure and, at least in Miami, his instincts getting ahead of what the situation required. You have got McLaren fighting hard but occasionally finding that strategy calls can undo what raw pace has built. And you have got drivers like Gasly, who did everything right and still ended the day with nothing to show for it because of someone else's spin on lap 1. That is Formula 1. That is the brutal beauty of it. You can execute perfectly and still lose. You can make a single error and take half the field down with you. And you can build something over 20 race weekends that ultimately comes down to moments that last less than a second. If you have been following this season closely, let me know in the comments, who do you think takes the championship this year? Is Antonelli maintaining this form all the way to the end? Can Verstappen find the consistency he needs? Drop your thoughts below because this conversation is just getting started. And if you enjoyed this breakdown, Make sure you are subscribed because we are going to be covering every single twist and turn of this incredible season. The next race is coming up fast, and based on what Miami just showed us, we are absolutely nowhere near done with the drama of 2026. What just happened in Miami might be one of the most entertaining Formula One races we have seen in years, and the fallout from it is even more fascinating. Lando Norris publicly calling out Max Verstappen in the cool-down room, a surprise winner in Kimi Antonelli, and a race that had twists and turns from the very first corner. Today we are breaking down everything from the 2026 Miami Grand Prix, and trust me, you do not want to skip a single second of this one. So let us start right at the beginning, because this race was chaotic before most viewers had even settled into their seats. Lap 1, Turn 1, and Max Verstappen spun trying to challenge Leclerc for the lead. Just think about that for a second. The four-time world champion, who showed up to Miami with what looked like a genuinely competitive car for the first time in the 2026 season, threw himself into that battle with everything he had and immediately found himself facing the wrong direction. Pierre Gasly, who was running right behind him, had to absolutely slam on his brakes to avoid plowing straight into the spinning Red Bull. Gasly himself came out and described that as a genuine close call, the kind of moment that makes you realize just how dangerous the first few laps of a street circuit race can be. Verstappen recovered, made it back into the pack, but the damage to his race strategy was already done. And here is where things get really interesting. Because of that spin, Verstappen ended up pitting under the early safety car on lap 7, taking on fresh rubber while the rest of the field stayed out. On the surface, that sounds like a smart recovery move, and in theory it could have been. But what unfolded over the next 40 laps became one of the defining storylines of the entire weekend. With fresh tires, Verstappen found himself in a position of temporary leadership as the frontrunners made their own scheduled stops. But eventually the faster cars came calling, and Verstappen had to make a choice. Does he let them through conservatively and try to hang on for whatever points he can salvage? Or does he go down swinging? If you have watched Max Verstappen race for even one season, you already know the answer to that question. What followed was a series of intense, aggressive defensive battles that had fans on the edge of their seats. Antonelli came through, then Norris, who had to genuinely work for it and at one point had to cover off a sharp move from Verstappen going into turn 17. Leclerc later arrived on the scene and on lap 47 managed to get alongside at turn 1, only for Verstappen to immediately fight back. These two traded positions multiple times in the same lap, with Leclerc eventually retaking third by turn 11. It was the kind of old-fashioned wheel-to-wheel racing that F1 fans absolutely live for. Piastri then completed his own overtake on Verstappen 2 laps later. And then came the George Russell incident, where Russell came into contact with Verstappen at turn 1 and walked away with front wing damage. The stewards looked at it and decided no further action was required, though you can probably imagine that not everyone agreed with that decision. Verstappen ultimately finished 5th after picking off Leclerc's damaged Ferrari in the final moments of the race. Now here is where the story takes its most viral turn. In the cool-down room after the race, Norris, Piastri, and race winner Kimi Antonelli were watching back some of the key battles from the afternoon. It is one of those behind-the-scenes moments that gives you a real window into how drivers actually think and process what just happened on track. Piastri pulled up a clip of his own overtake on Verstappen and was pretty pleased with how cleanly it went. He showed Norris, who confirmed that Verstappen did indeed try to come back past immediately after. And then Piastri said something really honest and revealing. He said there was nothing he could do about it. That speaks to something that has been a hot topic throughout the entire 2026 season, which is how the new power unit regulations and specifically the way battery deployment and harvesting works has fundamentally changed the dynamics of overtaking and defending. Drivers are finding that you can make a move stick, but the car behind can use a deployment phase to come straight back at you. It creates this yo-yo effect that has become a genuine talking point in the paddock. It makes for exciting television, but it is genuinely frustrating for the drivers involved because it undermines the feeling of actually earning and completing a pass. Piastri summed that up perfectly when he rued how difficult it has become to both pass someone and then keep them behind you in 2026 machinery. But it was what Norris said next that really set the internet on fire. Watching Verstappen's defensive battles play out on the screen, Norris just came straight out with it. He said he did not understand what Verstappen was doing, and that Verstappen had simply ruined his own race. Direct, unambiguous, and said while Verstappen was presumably somewhere in the same building winding down after the race. Classic Norris. Now the counter-argument to that, and it is a fair one, is that Verstappen probably had very little to gain by playing it safe anyway. Think about the maths here. Even if he had waved Antonelli, Norris, Piastri, and Leclerc past without a single wheel-to-wheel moment, he would still have been looking at a result somewhere in the 5th or 6th place range. Leclerc was closing in on him too fast for a conservative approach to have earned him any extra positions. So from that perspective, what exactly would have been the point of rolling over? This is Max Verstappen we are talking about, a 4-time world champion who has dominated this sport at the highest level, now driving through what has been by his lofty standards a very difficult season in terms of raw competitiveness. Those front-running minutes, those moments of genuine pace, they have been few and far between in 2026. When you factor all of that in, it becomes a lot easier to understand why he chose to fight tooth and nail for every single position. And the result of that approach? Verstappen walked away with the Driver of the Day award. The fans watching at home voted him as the standout performer despite finishing 5th. That tells you everything you need to know about how the crowd perceived his performance. He was the entertainment engine of that race in the second half. He was the reason so many of those moments ended up being highlights. Meanwhile, let us give proper credit to the man who actually won the race, because Kimi Antonelli's victory in Miami was genuinely impressive. This kid is 19 years old. He is in his debut season at Mercedes, and he led a race that was absolute carnage from the first lap to the last. He shared the lead in the opening stages with Leclerc and Norris, and when the dust settled, it was him standing on the top step. That is not a lucky win. That is a driver who is rapidly justifying all the hype that surrounded his arrival in Formula One. Norris himself expressed frustration after the race, pointing to a strategy call from McLaren that he felt cost him a genuine shot at the win. He was candid about it, saying he should never have been put in that situation and that it was gutting to feel like the race was there to be taken and then slip away because of a single call. This is the ongoing story arc of Norris's season in a lot of ways. The pace is clearly there, the talent is clearly there, but those moments where everything needs to align perfectly are still sometimes falling just short. The collective gasp moment in that cool-down room was actually not about Verstappen at all. It came when the 3 drivers watched back Leclerc's absolutely terrifying spin on the final lap. A spin that by all rights should have ended his race and quite possibly caused some serious damage, but somehow did not. Leclerc managed to keep the car out of the wall and bring it home. When Norris, Piastri, and Antonelli all reacted with shocked expressions watching it back, that pretty much tells you how close it was. So what does all of this mean for the championship picture going forward? Well, Antonelli now looks like a genuine title contender. Coming into Miami, he was already having a strong season for a rookie, but wins changed the conversation entirely. Norris is still right in the mix and will be motivated by what he sees as a missed opportunity. And Verstappen, despite the 5th place finish, showed in Miami that when the RB22 is in the right window, he can absolutely be a factor. The aggressive racing style is not going anywhere, whether other drivers think it is strategically sound or not. One thing is for certain. The 2026 Formula One season has delivered drama, controversy, unexpected winners, and the kind of genuine uncertainty at the front of the grid that makes the sport as compelling as it has been in a long time. Miami was a perfect encapsulation of everything that makes this season so unpredictable. Veteran champions fighting back from adversity, young talents announcing themselves on the biggest stage, strategy battles, contact, controversy, and drivers being completely honest with each other in a cool-down room while millions of people watch. If you want to see more breakdowns like this one, hit that subscribe button because we are covering every single race this season in depth. And drop your thoughts in the comments below. Do you agree with Norris that Verstappen cost himself positions by going so hard on defense? Or Or do you think the four-time champion made absolutely the right call and gave fans exactly what they wanted to see? Let us know where you stand. Lewis Hamilton is worried. And when a seven-time world champion starts asking questions about his own car, you know something serious is going on inside Ferrari. After a disappointing Miami Grand Prix weekend, Hamilton came out and publicly called on the Scuderia to examine what their rivals are doing with their front wings, because he believes McLaren, Mercedes, and Red Bull have all discovered something that Ferrari is simply not taking advantage of. Today we are breaking down exactly what happened in Miami, what Hamilton said, what it actually means for Ferrari going forward, and why this front wing debate could end up being one of the most important technical storylines of the entire 2026 season. So stick around, because this one goes deep. Let's start by setting the scene in Miami, because context matters here. Going into the Miami Autodrome weekend, there was genuine optimism around Ferrari. The team had brought 11 new components to the race, which is a significant upgrade package by any standard. Among those parts was a new front wing end plate and the revised rear wing that the team had been calling the Macarena wing. That is a lot of engineering work, a lot of hours from a lot of very smart people, and Ferrari arrived in Miami believing they had taken a meaningful step forward with the SF26. And for a brief moment, it looked like they might have been right. Charles Leclerc topped the timing sheets during the sole practice session on Friday, which naturally got people excited. But that high point turned out to be the exception rather than the rule for Ferrari that weekend. As the action progressed, the pace advantage evaporated, and by the end of race day, things had gone from disappointing to outright painful. Leclerc had a last lap spin that dropped him to 6th, and a post-race penalty pushed him further down to 8th. Hamilton finished 7th. No podiums. No top 5 finishes. For a team that had been consistently fighting at the front earlier in the season, Miami was a wake-up call. Now contrast that with what happened around them. Kimi Antonelli took a stunning race victory for Mercedes. Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri completed the podium for McLaren. Red Bull showed genuine improved pace, with Max Verstappen recording his best qualifying result of the season with a second place on the grid. In one weekend, Ferrari watched their closest rivals all step forward simultaneously while the Scuderia appeared to stand still. That is a painful position to be in. Here is where the front wing story becomes really fascinating. Red Bull came to Miami with 7 new parts, and one of the headline changes was a completely revised front wing setup. They altered all 3 front wing elements plus the end plate, with the goal of increasing aerodynamic load and improving flow stability around the rest of the car. McLaren also brought 7 new parts of their own, and their changes included updated front wing end plates as part of what has been described as a next-level front wing package. These were not minor tweaks. These were deliberate, targeted developments, and the results spoke for themselves. Hamilton himself acknowledged that McLaren's upgrade appeared to deliver more performance than even the team had anticipated heading into the weekend. Think about what that means. McLaren were expecting a gain, got that gain, and then discovered the gain was actually larger than their own simulations and wind tunnel work had predicted. That is the kind of upgrade that shifts the competitive order, and it is exactly the type of development Ferrari did not experience with their own package in Miami. So Hamilton decided to speak up. When asked about what Ferrari's rivals had done differently, he was very direct. He said that Mercedes, McLaren, and Red Bull are doing something different with their front wings compared to Ferrari, and that the team needs to study those designs and figure out whether there is an improvement to be found. He was not vague about it. He looked at the comparative visuals, saw that the wings look fundamentally different from one another, and pointed to that as a potential source of missing performance. He also made an interesting comment about the relationship between front wing design and what he described as straight line mode. Now, for those who need a bit of background here, modern Formula One cars use sophisticated aerodynamic systems that can behave differently depending on whether the car is going in a straight line or navigating a corner. The way a front wing loads up, flexes, or transitions between these states can have a profound effect on overall downforce, drag, and how the car balances through different phases of a lap. When Hamilton says the rival wings look different, he is not just talking about visual aesthetics. He is suggesting there may be a functional difference in how those wings generate and manage aerodynamic forces compared to what Ferrari is currently running. This is not the first time front wing design has become a talking point in 2026. Earlier in the season at the Chinese Grand Prix, Kimi Antonelli's Mercedes drew a lot of attention when observers noticed what appeared to be a multi-stage transition happening in the front wing as the car moved between straight line and cornering phases. People were convinced Mercedes had discovered some kind of aerodynamic trick. The story turned out to be more mundane than expected, with the team explaining it was actually a hydraulic pressure issue with the wing rather than an intentional design feature. But the fact that people were watching so closely, and that Mercedes, McLaren, and Red Bull have all since brought meaningful front wing developments, suggests this area of the car is absolutely central to where performance is being unlocked in the 2026 regulations. Ferrari, for their part, were not standing still in Miami. 11 new parts is a real upgrade effort. The front wing end plate change was part of that package. So Hamilton is not suggesting Ferrari ignored this area entirely. He is suggesting they may not have gone far enough, or that they may be approaching the design philosophy from a fundamentally different angle compared to what the faster teams are doing. That is a subtle but important distinction. It is one thing to bring an upgrade and have it underperform expectations. It is another thing entirely to bring an upgrade and realize your starting philosophy might need to be reconsidered from a higher level. What makes Hamilton's comments particularly noteworthy is the way he framed them. He was not panicking, and he was not throwing the team under the bus. He was analytical. He acknowledged that Ferrari worked extremely hard to run those components and that the car had taken a step forward. He just also acknowledged that the other teams took bigger steps and that the gap between what Ferrari achieved and what McLaren achieved with their respective packages is a problem that needs answering. That kind of measured, clear-eyed assessment is valuable coming from a driver of his experience. Hamilton has been around long enough to know when a team needs honest feedback versus encouragement, and in this case, he chose honesty. The broader competitive picture coming out of Miami is genuinely interesting. McLaren now appears to be pushing past Ferrari as Mercedes' primary challenger, at least based on this one data point. Kimi Antonelli is on an extraordinary run, having won 3 of the first 4 races of the 2026 season, and the question of whether he is now the favourite for the Drivers' Championship is one that a lot of people are asking out loud. Red Bull also showed that they are not going to be a soft touch as the season develops, with Verstappen's strong qualifying performance a reminder that they are always capable of surging forward when they get their car working properly. For Ferrari, the path forward from Miami requires honest answers to some difficult questions. Are they approaching front wing design with the right philosophy? Is there a fundamental aerodynamic concept that McLaren, Mercedes, and Red Bull have grasped that the Scuderia has not yet internalized? These are not easy questions to answer from inside an organization as large and proud as Ferrari. But Hamilton is essentially asking them to set pride aside and go and look at the data, look at the competing designs, and figure out what they might be missing. Coming from a driver who chose to join Ferrari in large part because he believed they could build a championship-winning car together, that request carries real weight. Ferrari does have another upgrade package coming according to Hamilton's comments in Miami, with Mercedes also expected to bring a bigger development step to the next race. So the competitive order is still being written. We are only 4 races into a long season, and there is time to course correct. But the gap in upgrade effectiveness between Ferrari's Miami package and what McLaren extracted from their own development represents a warning sign that the technical leadership at Maranello will need to take seriously. The front wing is, in many ways, one of the most philosophically revealing parts of a Formula One car. How a team designs it says something about how they understand the aerodynamic balance they are chasing, how they think about the trade-off between downforce and drag, and how they approach the problem of making a car work across all the different types of corners and straights on a modern Grand Prix circuit. When Hamilton stands in the Miami paddock and tells journalists to just look at the rival wings and compare them to Ferrari's, he is inviting everyone to ask that same deeper question. What does the philosophy behind those wings tell us about where the performance is really coming from? The answer to that question is going to shape Ferrari's 2026 season more than almost anything else. Hamilton came to Ferrari to win championships. The team brought 11 new parts to Miami hoping to take a step forward. Instead, they took a relative step backward while the competition accelerated. That is the reality of modern Formula One. Development never stops, the margins are brutal, and sometimes the most important insight comes not from what you built, but from being honest enough to study what someone else built and ask yourself whether you have been looking at the problem in the right way all along. Ferrari now face exactly that reckoning, and how they respond will define whether this season ends in glory or frustration for Hamilton and the entire Maranello operation.